That's a deal, right? Ride with me if you ride with me. You can slide with me if you feel like 550 on the 5 sticky. Come get high with me. That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right?
So they want me down and out. Ay, we ain't going out like that. We ain't going out like that. Watch me go and bounce right back. Down for the count, but that house strike.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Whole Brother Live. When I do these episodes, I try to pull in relevant news topics that have to do with black men and black culture, right? And over recent weeks, I feel like it's been kind of slow. But then something happened between last week and this week where a whole bunch of stuff just kind of blew up around the same time. I guess it was the Diddy trial already being ongoing, and then particularly DDG and his issues, Tory Lanez and his representatives coming out, and then even as recently as today, just updates with Chris Brown. And let me just go ahead and do the Chris stuff first. Well, actually, in short, Chris Brown was posting recently about Free Tory Lanez, who has been sentenced to 10 years for shooting Meg Thee Stallion, so violence. And then you got Chris, who has a history of that he tries to say he wants to distance himself from as far as beating Rihanna, but he posts Free Tory Lanez and then was also arrested internationally, I believe, for attacking somebody. So it's just my theme for today is brothers, black men in particular, and how we present ourselves to the public, the image that we have, and reputation, legacy, private behaviors, things of that nature, because there's so many inconsistencies that are coming out that I think we need to be more conscious of. So let's jump right in. So Diddy, as you already know, settled with Cassie. I believe he paid her $20 million. Civil suit, that happened, that has come and gone. But now he actually has a federal trial, and they're charging him with, I believe, racketeering, like a criminal organization in Rico, sex trafficking, and I forgot the third one, but I think it might have to do with like crossing state lines to commit a crime or bringing the sex workers across state lines. But it's things related to that. It's not actually related to the viral video that everyone's seen with him beating Cassie. So the interesting thing that has come up is that my understanding is the defense has kind of been, even his people are conceding that, yeah, he's a terrible person. They're kind of just conceding that point. And it's unfortunate because reputations are really important and character matters. And even though for the sake of this case, they're trying to concede that to move to something else, that in terms of he's a horrible person, we concede that. I see that all too often. All too often, there are prominent black men in media and other spaces who may have talent or success in one area, whether it be music, entertainment, sports, talent in one area, but character always brings them down. Or people more close to him identify that, yeah, he's a horrible person. You know, when I caught up to the reality that a lot of people were saying that, yeah, Michael Jordan was amazing on the court, but he was a horrible person too. It seemed like people really didn't mind that because we cared more about his performance on the court. And time again, I find myself in a position where I'm trying to get us as a culture, but black men in particular, to realize who you are matters more than your accomplishments. Um, Yet we seem to live in a culture where it seems as if you can outperform your bad behavior. So if you make enough money, have enough success in your career, put enough people on, that kind of offsets bad behavior. But that's not necessarily true. But here are some examples of how this plays out on a cultural level. So the first thing is what I'm observing in terms of the conversations about Diddy's trial is there's pushback for the men who were saying, I can't imagine being in Cassie's husband's shoes as he listens to her talking about and other people talking about all these sex acts she did with sex workers and with Diddy and so on and so on and so forth. And the pushback for the guys is y'all so focused on the man, that's misogyny. Why aren't you compassionate for this woman and what she's going through and the abuse she received? So I see people fighting in terms of that conversation. I'm not here to say one is right and one is wrong, but I am here to try to establish some middle ground and understanding. So first, I want the brothers to understand that, yeah, I know that brothers might be putting themselves in his shoes. Like, it is really hard to hear that information. A lot of men pride themselves on the exclusivity of their relationship in terms of their woman, the woman that they're with. But I do think it's helpful to hear another perspective and for guys to understand that, hey, there are a lot of terrible things being put on the table. And it seems like that's being glossed over just to look at the pride of the man who actually wasn't necessarily the one getting beat on or allegedly coerced or forced into these sex acts, as Cassie says she was. So I do think it'd be helpful for us to say, hold on a minute. Let me look at the larger picture here before I engage on this topic. Because sometimes when it comes to social media, we zoom in on what's relevant to us or what impacts us. And sometimes that's interpreted as disregard for the other areas. But we're just zooming in on relevance. It's not necessarily a deprioritization of the other things, but it can be perceived that way. So this also happened when the early days of this Diddy stuff, where we weren't talking, us as men, a lot of us weren't talking about the sex trafficking, the abuse, the drugs, him being an overall horrible person. We would just focus on the fact that Diddy might be gay. So that same thing is kind of happening here where it's like, hey, there's a much larger issue here, but we're zooming in on the things that are most relevant to us, and it comes off as a deprioritization of more important things. So I think the caution here is to just recognize the sensitivity of the topic you're addressing, whether it's publicly or privately, and consider those things. The other elements that I see at play in terms of us as men engaging in this discussion is kind of the ugliness around, if she wanted to be there, she wanted to be there. That's her choice. There are some other things to consider before engaging in that way, and one is age. I remember when Cassie first came on my TV screen. I was a child at the time. There was this pretty girl, real slim, racially ambiguous, and she has this song called Me and You. She sang it in a cute, light way, but it was very sexual. The song, it was as close to explicit as you could get, but still be on the radio, I think. And I think even they had to mute some of the parts of stuff she said in the song. But this very overtly sexual song. And then next thing you know, she's with Diddy, much older than her. And then more recently we saw this, and I remember kind of my stomach turning when I saw Diddy was with Young Miami more recently. And this is before all this stuff came out. When I saw Diddy with Young Miami, I was thinking to myself, like, man, I know a lot of black men look up to Diddy, and I hate that we have to herald entertainers as our heroes, and a lot of times that's just tied to them having money. But a lot of black men look up to Diddy because of his success. Diddy, Jay-Z, 50 Cent, Dr. Dre, things that these men were able to accomplish, people respect them for that. But when I saw Diddy out with Young Miami, I thought, where is this going? And I wondered about the nature of that relationship, because the guys that date younger women, a lot of them are quick to defend it and get upset if people talk about why they do it. But I'm going to stand firmly, as I always have, and just talk about the fact that for some of them, it is about getting someone you can manipulate, getting someone you can abuse, getting someone you can coerce, and getting someone that is in a lower financial position to you to kind of keep your thumb on them, so that they're depending on you for livelihood support and things of that nature. So when I saw Diddy out with Young Miami, even though she wasn't early 20s, she wasn't a minor, she was late 20s, closer to 30, I still knew about the financial difference that was there. I looked at Young Miami as a struggling rapper. I know y'all might like the City Girls, but I knew that their careers wouldn't last long, and I knew that that wasn't going to be the thing to sustain her and get her and her family out of the hood. I looked at who her baby daddies are, and I'm like, yeah, don't seem too stable, honestly, in my opinion. So when I see Diddy with his status wanting to engage with someone like that, I immediately thought, oh, I wonder what he's using her for. Uh, and similarly with Cassie, we see that in some of the original filings, Young Miami was identified as one of the sex workers. And in many ways now, looking at this new trial, essentially Cassie was being used in that way. So we see a power dynamic, a age dynamic, money dynamic, using women for purposes that you see fit for. Uh, and people can agree to things, but it doesn't mean that just because someone agreed to something that it was right. And I hate that to help men understand why some of this stuff is problematic, you always, unfortunately, you commonly have to use a woman in their life that they care about. Then they suddenly realize, oh, that's not cool. So let's just say you, as a man, you have an adult daughter, you end up dying one day, and your wife is old in age and not really able to function as much, but you have an adult daughter who's out here just trying to figure life out. She is above the age of 18, but she's an adult, she's above 18. She's trying to figure things out, and there's a manager at her job who is promising her a promotion, but also pressuring her for sex. I'll hook you up with this. You just got to do this for me. Your daughter is trying to figure it out on her own. You're gone. Your wife isn't able to help as much. This guy's putting pressure on her and promising her a level of security in exchange for sex. Wouldn't you just say you wouldn't want someone to put your daughter in that position to even make that choice? For her to have to potentially be struggling to keep her head above water, potentially to feed a child, and she may not have other layers of financial security, and now she really has to weigh the options. Is giving my body up in this way, is doing this with this person worth what they're going to offer me? And I think reasonable people would say, I wouldn't want my daughter to be put in that position. And if you can understand that in terms of, even if she agreed, I wouldn't have wanted her to be put in that position, then I think you can understand why in this Cassie situation, yes, she went along with some of it, but look at the time in which it started. Look at the dynamics, look at the pressure. And then again, what she's and they are suggesting is there was some coercion, blackmail, so on and so forth. So I think we need to be more compassionate in terms of understanding that just because an adult woman agreed to something doesn't mean that everything is above board, free, and clear because of the example I just gave you. And then on top of that, let's set the standard higher for men too. Pursuing every sexual desire is not innate to manhood. And even though many of us have been taught that if as a man, if you want it, go after it, shoot your shot, there are times where we need to tell ourselves no, especially if it's a conflict of interest, especially if it's something that ends up being illegal that will tarnish your legacy forever, which is what Diddy's going through now. People seem to malfunction in their minds when I say that a lot of Diddy's issues are tied to sexual discipline. Some people respond to me and say, oh, it's not about sexual discipline. He's just a horrible guy. He's evil. I don't deny those things, but what I'm saying is he had unbridled sexual desire. His power and money and access helped him to facilitate these sexual desires that came up. And look how out of control it got. We need to be able to tell ourselves no. I may be attracted to such and such. I may want to do such and such, but there are situations where we need to tell ourselves no. Sometimes the most masculine thing you can do is to tell yourself no, because you understand the bigger picture of what's going on. Your family, your finances, your career, your reputation, your morals. I'm not going to do such and such because I want to make sure those things are intact. But time and time again, as I'm going to discuss with you today, we see instances of black men throwing it all away for some sex, and they end up in similars like or similar to Diddy. Another aspect of this, I see m- men having unbridled sexual desire and how this ties to the Diddy case. And some of this is my speculation. I can't confirm all of it, but I do think some of this was in the previous court documents and other lawsuits. And these are also rumors that have been going on for years too. But we're kind of close to it. So what we do know with this current trial is there was a male sex worker allegedly that Diddy hired to have sex with Cassie while Diddy watched. Um, to go even further, what came out was that Cassie said that Diddy liked her to retrieve the man's semen and then rub it on Diddy's nipples. There have long been rumors of uh, Diddy being gay. That is something, if you've been in the barbershop, if you talk amongst your family, that's something that people were throwing out there. I never knew for sure. You know, all the different stuff, black entertainer rumors we've heard over the years, right? And some of the stuff that's come out with these recent lawsuits and this current trial seem to be pointing in that direction. 50 Cent has suggested this about Diddy for a long time. And I've noticed ever since this trial stuff blew up, a lot of men in the industry have been absolutely dead silent. It seems like the only one talking is 50 Cent, and everybody else is shutting up. So that's just my speculation. It's been a little interesting. But the point I'm making is there's some questioning there in terms of Diddy's motives. I can speak to this generally. I know there are men that are questioning their sexuality or uncomfortable fully leaning into their sexuality in terms of a layer of interest in men. So what they do is the compromise is having men be involved in sexual activities with women. It's kind of like a psyop in their own head, playing these own psychological games of, and it might make them feel better about it, but it's like, well, rather than going directly for men, I can get that itch scratched, so to speak, by bringing it in proximity with women. Some of what some people have thrown out there, so I know that that exists, but some of what people have thrown out there and what I speculate could have also been going on in some of these situations, because I imagine there's more than just this one male sex worker. Uh, there has been discussions of blackmail, and part of me wonders if Diddy may have been dealing with some of those attractions he wasn't able to be open about, and if the way to achieve that was rather than just being open about it and pursuing consensual relationships with other men, it seems to me that he baited men in with the opportunity to have sex with women that he was making available. As I mentioned previously in another suit, my Young Miami and Cuban Link, which is one of 50 Cent's. I'm sorry, no, not Cuban Link. I'm sorry, I done said the wrong woman's name. But one of 50 Cent's baby mothers, I'm forgetting her name right now. It's not Cuban Link. My apologies. But it's the other one. I'm forgetting her name. But they were mentioned as sex workers, and my suspicion is Diddy was baiting men in by offering the opportunity to have sex with these women. And then you introduce drugs and other things, and now he's getting to live out a fantasy with some of these men. I think what I'm seeing is patterns of blackmail, baiting men in, having hidden cameras, having them do things they probably wouldn't have done under normal circumstances, and then blackmailing them to continue doing it. It seems like a mix of all those things were going on, and I wonder how many of your favorite rappers or industry people fell victim to that. Who did he invite to come have sex with Young Miami that then turned into a you thought Young Miami was the target, but you're the target? You know, who fell victim to that? It seems like some of that was going on. Uh, it goes back to this unbridled desire for sex that these men walked into these situations too. It feeds this stereotype of black men are so just driven by their penises that all you got to do is throw something out there sexually and they'll fall in line. It feeds just the worst stereotypes about us, and in many ways I've observed we do meet that stereotype. We're so sexually driven that we make irrational decisions and then complain about the consequences later. Talk all the trash in the world about your baby mother, but you didn't consider these things before having unprotected sex. So many of us complain after the fact, and we're reactive rather than being proactive. So I want to encourage us to be proactive and to not allow ourselves to be fully driven by sex. So again, we need to be able to tell ourselves no. And depending on where you are in your career, your life, what part of the country, the ability to tell yourself no could keep you from potentially being a Diddy victim or caught up in something you didn't want to get caught up with. You were baited in by the opportunity to sleep with Cassie or Young Miami or um, whoever, and now you caught up in something that you didn't even mean to get caught up in. That you didn't mean. Yeah, now you're questioning or confused. I I wouldn't be shocked if more things like that come out over time. So it goes back to us again being more disciplined with sex. Um, Lastly, I want to address men that say that Diddy is just being charged for being freaky. It's not a crime to be freaky. It's not a crime to be nasty. Uh, if we look at the charges again, racketeering, the RICO, and sex trafficking, they're alleging that he was using people in his businesses to help facilitate getting the materials for the sex parties and making arrangements to have people travel across state lines to have paid sex. That is not the same as just being freaky or being a little nasty. He was getting other people involved with this to help facilitate this and potentially even using business accounts or expenses to do so. So it's not that simple. And I think it's important for us to read before speaking on things like that because that also feeds the stereotype of us just kind of being ignorant. Just speaking on stuff all freely, willy nilly. One of the main people that does this is like Boosie. Just always speaking out of turn, ignorant. Educate yourself about what's going on. You may have a hot take, but just take the time to read up on things first. So this is allegedly meeting the quota of sex trafficking and RICO because he had multiple people involved in facilitating this. Multiple people involved in facilitating crimes and doing things across state lines and paying people, specifically the sex workers. So you having a girlfriend that lives in a different state and you paying for her flight to come to your state and y'all having sex, that's not sex trafficking. And that's not what Diddy did here. This is a much different situation. There were people being hired for their sex. These were not romantic situations. All of them weren't. That's what's being said. So it's not the same thing. And you would know that from just kind of basic reading. So those are my takes on the Diddy situation. Next is DDG versus Halle. If you don't know, DDG is a rapper and a streamer, probably more so known for his streaming. And in 2025, streaming has become a career supposedly, and he's a celebrity for streaming. Um, he is under fire because his child's mother, the Little Mermaid, Halle Bailey, was granted a restraining order against him, order of protection, whichever word it was. And she alleged some level of abuse too. Since then, DDG's brother, Aiden Ross, and Deshae Frost, another streamer, all these guys stream, have come out to say, no, DDG's a good guy. I've never seen him abuse anybody, you know. And that's just like there's been similar situations where men are accused of causing harm to someone, and then another dude just pops out like, well, no, I didn't. He's a good dude from my perspective. I think it was when Tory Lanez stuff was coming out. Kodak Black, who also has similar allegations, appeared to say, no, Tory Lanez is a good dude. So there's this constant thing where men speak into things, specifically where it's a man abusing a woman, and then other men voluntarily put their name out there to co-sign him that he didn't have that experience. He's a good guy. Um, we need to keep in mind that women experience men much differently than the friends of those men. Typically getting a whole different person. One is a platonic same gender relationship. The other is a romantic opposing gender relationship. So it's not even really helpful or necessary to speak into your experience because you're not a woman who was dating this man. And the impression can end up being that you're just trying to deflect or undercut. Obviously, your experience was different. Y'all weren't having sex. Y'all weren't dating. So it's not even necessary to say, I didn't see that, other than to just try to help boost some level of credibility for the person in question, but it's also undercutting the potential victims. So on a practical level, we just need to recognize that the women that our male friends are romantically involved with are always typically going to experience them differently. You know, all of us know about the emotions that romantic relationships tend to bring out of people. People go through a breakup, lose their appetite, don't want to go out. Some even want to harm themselves. People take time to recover from breakups. And friendship breakups are hard too for some. But we recognize that these relationships are different and someone can behave much differently. On top of that, I think if we're being honest as men, a lot of men's relationships are very surface level too. So just because you drink with him or you play the game with him or y'all used to be on a sports team together, that doesn't mean that you know him. You really can't speak to what he would do if he was angered by his romantic partner. So I think we need to be real with ourselves that a lot of us don't know our friends beyond a certain point, so we really can't speak to certain things because we keep our relationships very surface level in general. Again, that doesn't apply to everybody. I'm just saying it's a reality that many of us have very limited insight into what's going on because we keep our conversations very surface level. So again, what relevance do we have to speak to what he will or won't do or what he did or didn't do to his romantic partner? This doesn't mean that you have to believe everybody, but sometimes in living in community, we can cause more harm by potentially undercutting victims just to say that didn't happen to me. Well, of course it didn't happen to you. A lot of times, abusive men know who to target and who not to target, you know? So that's just something to keep in mind. The other thing is the social media campaign. Actually, no, let me go to the decision making. I do have some smoke for the women too. You, like me, probably saw the Bailey sisters, Hallie and Chloe, as wholesome at first. Chloe then began to be more explicit in some of her presentations to show her adult sexual side, brand herself as a grown woman. Cool. Hallie didn't seem to talk as much. I used to perceive her as timid. Of course, I don't know these people though. But again, on the outside looking in, these are some perceptions that people had. So when she popped out dating and pregnant by DDG, a lot of people were shocked because I think she was perceived as the wholesome young girl, and then he is the rapper and streamer, who I would just say historically in terms of his online content has been a stereotypical kind of ignorant guy. Look who I'm dating. Look who I'm having sex with. Look how much money I got. Just the same type of stuff. That's the type of content that he's put out. I've, as some women would say, it never gave family man, you know? So I was off put like, man, why would she have a child with this guy? And I felt that way when Cardi B got with Offset too. I look at certain women's decisions and I'm like, well, why did she choose to have a child with him? And I'm 10 for 10, 20 for 20. I'm always right with this where I look at these situations when they first start and I say, well, that doesn't seem like a healthy person to try to build a family with. That don't seem like it's going to go well. So when Halle first got with DDG, I said to myself, and I said in my inner circles, like, yeah, that ain't going to end well. That wasn't a good decision. He's not that guy. And his image online says that he's not that guy. And I predicted it would end this way, and it went exactly how I expected. Same thing with Cardi and Offset. So I do think there's something to be said about women. I don't know if it's naivete or what it is, but I don't want to give some of these men that much credit that they somehow deceived you. If I, from a distance that don't know these people, can clearly see where this is headed and that's not a person to build a family with, then how are you, who actually are much closer, how did you not see it? It leaves a lot of questions to be asked. But there's time and time again where women as well complain about a man not being a good partner or father. But at the same time, all of us at a distance already knew that. And we can see it clearly because they weren't hiding their dysfunction. They kind of put it on Front Street, yet you still signed up to be a part of this. You know, many people had this question for Sierra when she first got with Future. It's like, is that what you really want? Is that what you want to sign up for? And look how it ended. Same thing with Cardi and Offset. All the baby mamas. And you know, what were you expecting? So there is seemingly something there about the decision making. Pick better applies to men and women. But in no way does this justify what's being alleged if he was physically harming her. You know, that's obviously a problem. But again, some of the signs were there well in advance that wasn't someone to engage with in that way. In terms of the social media campaign, this happened with DDG and Tory. Tory Lanez, these guys seem to be more invested in winning the court of public opinion, essentially Twitter, than winning in court. Halle got her restraining order, which means she won in court. But DDG, and I don't think it's a coincidence, I'm pretty sure this is planned, all his streamer friends and him and people online are leaking stuff about Halle and trying to paint her to be a bad person and how he's not at fault and he's such a good guy and such a good parent and it's clearly intentional. And my thing is, as a grown man, because he also talked about, I wanted to see my child. He'll go on stream. Everything is content. Everything is to try to make money. Everything's happening on stream. And I think it's intentional. But there's this reality that trying to sway the public's opinion to look negatively at your baby mama and look more positively at you is still a loss for you, and you're still losing in the courts. So it makes you ask the question, what is this really about? Is this about just winning perception? Is this just about followers? And are you that desperate for money that all of this has to be used as content for streams? Or do you really want to see your son? Because that can be arranged through court. Similarly, with Tory Lanez, that trial's over. He's been sentenced to 10 years. And now all of a sudden we got this new story. And as of that announcement, his people had not filed anything with the appellate court. So again, this press conference was all a show for social media. While essentially, even though it wasn't Tory Lanez versus Meg, essentially Meg won in court because he was found guilty of what she said he did, which was shooting her. So you see the women are winning in court and the men are doing stuff online. The men got friends to post stuff online that favors them. You can go viral. You can get all these views online that seemingly support you. But again, it's looking very juvenile and ignorant. And as I said in a previous video about this, either these guys are just completely ignorant about how the system works, or they're BSing. They're purposely trying to muddy the waters about the truth about what happened in their respective situations by posting online to convince you to believe a lie. It's either one or the other. And I hope that they're not fully grown adults and that ignorant about how things work. Because winning in the court of public opinion and losing in court is still a loss in court. I have another note for myself here because I kind of wedded the two stories of DDG and Tory Lanez and the social media campaigns they're doing rather than winning in court. But I have one more note for Tory, and it was pretty much because over the time of this Tory stuff, I've seen concerted efforts to try to get a narrative out on Twitter in particular. Megan has even sued a blogger named Milagro for playing a part and putting out those stories. So I've watched this stuff happen online, and I've seen them, since he's been sentenced, keep trying to set up these campaigns where some breakthrough's about to happen in the case. They put some document out online, and thousands of people were trying to push this narrative on Twitter that Tory was about to be released because a judge just found him innocent. And it was just a filing to say that if y'all got something to say, we'll listen to you. That's essentially what it was saying. But they tried to push this narrative that because the courts are willing to hear whatever they want to say, that somehow this is proof that, like, just complete nonsense being pushed online. About 3 or 4 times they've tried to start campaigns online about Tory's about to get free, Tory's been found innocent, new evidence shows that Megan didn't get shot. And they keep trying to get people riled up online and nothing ever happens. He's still sitting in prison. So when the stabbing story came out, and now this story about, well, actually, Kelsey shot her, and we knew this the whole time. It looks like crying wolf. It looks like here's another story that they're trying to push out there, and it makes me even question if the stabbing was real. It really makes me wonder because there have been so many experiences in advance of this where it was clearly a media narrative to create deception online about things that weren't true. So many lies have been put out there since his sentencing, trying to create a firestorm and this momentum of him about to get out and things being overturned where nothing of the sort was actually happening in court. So I don't even know if the stabbing was real. I got some stories for you. I'm ashamed to say that it was very easy to pull together stories of black men in media who have had drama related to physical abuse of women or their romantic relationships become visibly toxic before the world. You got Chris Brown, who beat Rihanna, and that relationship clearly turned toxic. It was with Karrueche. She tried to move on. He began harassing the people that she was dating. The baby, and now mind you, and Chris said, free Tory Lanez. You got the baby who gets with Danny Lay and calls her a side bitch on live while she's pregnant with his child. And he also, I don't know if he said free Tory Lanez, but he definitely made the song with him after all the stuff came out and stood beside him in many ways. Tory Lanez had a history of violence before the Megan Thee Stallion situation. Look up his interactions with Prince. Look up his interactions with August Alsina. Look up his interactions with Joshua Benoit. Tory's been violent before this. Soulja Boy, who recently came at DDG for potentially getting violent with Halle. Well, Soulja was just in court too for violence. And we've seen on that reality show that he was on with Teddy Riley's daughter and other situations where soldiers been caught up in this kind of stuff too. DDG's been accused of being physically violent, and Diddy also. We saw him on camera being physically violent. And it's really disheartening that it is so common not only for these stories to be out here of black men being violent, but the violence is typically directed at their romantic partners. It's such an ugly thing to acknowledge, but it's true. And I could add more to this list, but I just pulled this short list together to say that we got a problem, guys. And rather than spending our time defending the right to sleep with younger women, if they're down with it, uh, or trying to speculate whether or not Diddy's gay, I think we got bigger fish to fry. Is all I'm saying. There is so much progress that could be made if we have the more important conversations. I'm entertaining some of the ideas that have been thrown out there for the sake of the podcast, but the way that I try to manifest this is through counseling, through books, through content like this, but also in my interpersonal relationships. So many of us will never be in close proximity with the people that I've discussed today, but I do think we can make a major difference by standing up for certain things in our personal community. What does this look like in terms of you and your homeboys or your brother? I don't think we should stay silent when we see a man we have a personal relationship with being physically abusive to a woman in his life. Cheating on her, same thing. I don't stand by immorality, and I don't think we should. I know that many of us have been taught the mindset that his relationship is his business, ain't none of my business. I don't think that's helpful overall. And I think we would appreciate somebody being a little nosy or having some accountability, again, if the victim was a woman that we loved. So we shouldn't have to tie a story to a woman that matters to us, i.e., our daughter or our mother, for us to suddenly have nobility or morality about things that men do to women that are wrong. So, speaking up when you know guys are cheating, speaking up when you know guys are being abusive, speaking up when you know guys aren't actually taking care of themselves, speaking up when you know guys are fighting for custody just to piss the baby mama off, even though he has no intentions or plans or even a safe environment for the child. I've seen guys that actively are in the drug game arguing to get the child when they actually may be a target in the streets. So if the child stays with you, they suddenly become a target too, or they're in danger. But you just trying to get back at your baby mother because you're mad. I've seen men who don't even have stable homes or money arguing about time with their child. And I think our community would benefit from other men saying, bro, get your stuff together. You doing this because you're bitter, you're mad at her. She has a home, she has her mother helping her. You still figuring out the home situation. So maybe let's not fight that battle right now. Maybe slow down in terms of all the different sex partners. Because what's really going on here? Is this helping you or is this hurting you? Because, again, while the assumption is part of being a straight man is just having wild, random, repeated sex, that's not necessarily true. And we've seen the ways that has evolved into something very damaging. So, men's accountability is the theme for today. And a lot more progress can be made if we didn't stand by idly and turn a blind eye to dysfunction in other men. If another man spoke up on some of these things now, it could prevent another woman from being harmed. That's all I got for you today. If you've appreciated today's episode or you appreciate content like this, or if you support the idea of black men being in therapy, please visit wholebrothermission.com and consider a one-time or monthly tax-deductible gift to support our work. We have a nationwide network of mental health professionals serving and prioritizing Black men because a whole family starts with the whole man. And as individuals begin to heal, the community begins to heal. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you for joining me.